Hey guys, welcome back. BDC Care here. We're back with our weekly Q&A. This is Season 3, Episode 11. This first question comes from that guy called Matt, and we're actually going to put it up on the screen just so you can read along with us. So I recently downloaded Injustice, but it won't open. I constantly receive a message saying, unfortunately, Injustice has stopped. And then we say,
uninstall it and reinstall it from an official source.
And then he says, I installed it from Google Play Store.
So our response was, if it wasn't working, it didn't matter whether you installed it from the Google Play Store or not. What I'm saying is that you need to uninstall it and reinstall it from Google Play if you're on Android, or whatever the equivalent is if you're on iOS. So did you uninstall it? And he came back saying it still didn't work. And the question is interesting, and it was worth putting up here, not because of the content, not because we actually have anything more to say about the question, because if it doesn't work like that from the very beginning, then you need to just uninstall it. I think the danger is, okay, so you know how there's a saying goes, you can never ask, there's never a bad question?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily the question is bad, but sometimes you can ask the wrong question. It may not even be the question is an issue. I think maybe part of it is that we know a little bit too much sometimes for our own good.
Yeah.
So I guess the perspective, this is sort of a bit of a meta answer in terms of thinking about what it actually means, because when people ask a question, it seems pretty straightforward in your head, and sometimes even when you write it down, it's actually pretty clear. But if we know a bit more about what's been going on, it gets really hard to answer. And the problem, I guess, is that answering them properly takes a lot of time.
Yeah, because there's so many. The problem is when you look at like this question specifically, there's so many different factors that could have made it work or not work. It could be that your device isn't supported, so it doesn't tell you whether you have the specs or not. It could be just that you don't have the specs in one way or another. It could be something weird about the file, or something about the download got corrupted. I know that's a possibility where when you download something, there's a way for it to get corrupted and it won't open until you uninstall and reinstall.
Right.
There's a multitude of issues, and I'm sure there's a ton that we aren't even aware of.
Right, so it's not like we're intentionally trying to be pain in the arses, but sometimes there's just subtleties. So, you know, I've had that happen to me a few times.
Yeah.
And it could be something, I guess, it comes back to the fact that we don't know what you've done to get to that point.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the person who's asking the question can't know what we need to know because they're just lost.
Yeah, because if you knew exactly what we needed to know, you'd probably be better at fixing it yourself because you have access to your device and we don't. If you could give us the exact information that we needed, you'd probably actually be the best bet for fixing it would be you.
And you know what? It ties in, but not perfectly, to the reason why we originally started this channel, right? That instructions sometimes, especially when we're talking comments and text, aren't that clear, and questions and answers aren't that clear, and we thought we'd demonstrate on video in real time to show what was happening. And I think this touches on the same idea, that when we know about the different possibilities, sometimes it's almost worth, or it takes more time than we've got to be able to answer properly. But I think, at least in this particular case, the issue is if you've never played it, you can't get it to work when you start it. If we're not working with any more information, what will really happen is if you uninstall it and install it and it works, great. And if it doesn't, then there's probably more than we can actually deal with.
And here's the thing, it might be an issue with your device, but it's not even like if you gave us the device information, we need to look up the specs and then look up the specs for Injustice and then cross-reference those and go, maybe could it? We still wouldn't probably be able to give you a satisfying answer.
And we're not assuming that you're actually downloading it from a funky source, but we know that people do that, and we can't assume, you know, can you imagine if each of the threads was, are you on Android or iOS? Do you have this? Have you done this? Have you done this? Before we can actually come to an answer. And a lot of times that's just not possible.
Yeah. That's almost the tech support domain.
Oh, not almost.
Yeah.
That's like tech support hell. Did you turn your
it's like turning it on and off? Recreational tech support. We're just undertaking this burden.
All right.
Of figuring out other people's issues. I don't even like to figure out issues with my own computer.
Oh man, don't get me started talking about family.
Oh.
Anyways,
so there we go. Our next question comes from Candy Creep 60.
Hey, you're sounding pretty sick. Eh?
Yeah, I've got some congestion and I've got a cough that I'm trying not to get into the audio.
Let me read the question. This is from.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
Hey, I just found your channel after a long nostalgia trip back into Injustice. I've been a veteran of this game for a very long time and came back to it after finding Injustice 2 Mobile lacking. I like your informative commentary because you know how to keep it clear and concise. I would like to know, what were your thoughts on gear when it was first introduced, and what do you think of it now? Thanks for the memories. Time to get back into it.
Thanks. Welcome back.
Yeah.
I feel exactly the same way you did about Injustice 2. I still check out the boards every once in a while to see what's up. And I think, thank goodness I'm out of that grind when I see how frustrated people are getting with how much work they have to get in Arena. And now they split Arena into 4 ladders, which doesn't seem like necessarily a bad thing, but it's, for anybody who started early, that's got to be killer to realize, wait a minute, the leaderboard is not getting any bigger, so that each percentage, the number of people in each percentage is getting smaller.
Yeah.
So it becomes harder and harder to rank up high.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so anyways, looking back on it, so this, this whole gear thing, initially I thought, customization, woohoo!
Oh man, I had 2 thoughts. My first thought is, wow, this is so cool, and my second thought is, wow, this is going to take literally forever. It's going to be impossible to get this all maxed out.
I totally agree with you. I mean, that at that point it was more grinding, right? So we were at, I think, maximum level 40, elite 5.
Yeah, and then we got a whole nother 10 levels. We got a whole other 2 elite levels. Little did we know
that we would end up at 60 elite 10 as a possibility.
Yeah, and what's really funny is that first time that we upped the elite level, this is unrelated to gear, you started stockpiling extra character cards.
I did.
You were like, one day, now that we know they increased it once, they're going to do it again. One day they're going to increase it to Elite 8 or Elite 9 or Elite 10 or something.
Yeah.
And I said, really? I think that's going to be so far down the line, I don't think it's going to be worth thinking about. And I was wrong and you were right.
But in the scale of mobile games, actually that was really far down the line. There was a good chance that if it was going to be like any other mobile game, it would never survive long enough to get to that point.
It's true, so we're both a little bit right, but you bet on the right horse in that case.
Yeah.
You had a bunch of extra copies of cards.
Yeah, boy, that was... And you know what? That was actually our second sort of biggest glitch, when we took the experience of, I believe it was iOS had that update first.
Yeah.
And there was one particular glitch, and as soon as the update came out for Android, I tested it, confirmed that it worked, and that was our next big glitch video.
Yeah. And I think gear was really, really cool when it first came out, because we were hearing all this stuff from iOS and we were late because Android was always late. And so we started hearing about combinations, started hearing about stuff, but I think we saw some lists that had a lot of gear, but I don't think we really had a grasp on all of it. So we're looking at gear that was going to come out and we're like, oh man, when the game comes out, we want that one and that one and that one. And like... We're thinking about team setups and gear setups, and I remember talking with friends about the gear that was coming out, and like each of us like talking about like one that we had seen and been like, oh man, this one would be really cool, and thinking about how these would work together.
And the implementation of it actually was much better than other Warner Brothers / NetherRealm games, because it allowed you to use shards for any one gear. So the shards were generic, and you could, once you had the first piece, you could upgrade it. Right? For example, Mortal Kombat X, you needed the specific gear 10 more times to upgrade it. And look at how many gears are possible.
Yeah.
That was painful. Now, shards aren't as hard to get as with Injustice 2 either, and the gears are actually interchangeable, so that you can take one piece of gear and put it on different people if you actually like that. So
it takes more time for sure.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of time spent in the gears, but I think a lot of the fun of the game actually comes from tinkering with teams and gear setups.
Right, the interchangeability.
So I think the planning is actually a lot of the fun of the playing in Injustice. So I feel like the sacrifice that you make for the time that it takes is partially necessary to the fun of actually playing. Like, it's a core component of it, and taking out the kind of fiddly time that you spent also took out like a core kind of component of what I really liked about it.
I agree. Because here, in Injustice 1, Injustice Gods Among Us, you can take 9 pieces of gear, and that's it. That's all you need. If you pick the right ones for you and how you play, you don't need to do anything else.
Yeah.
And you actually have that kind of control. Now, that was what we thought initially. That's what it's been like for a large part of the time. but I feel like it's sort of gone off the rails a little bit, right? Because it's become a little bit unbalanced with certain pieces of gear that are either overwhelmingly powerful or that add very little except to sort of cause games to be dragged out.
Yeah, what I really would have liked is if we had just seen more different abilities that didn't break stuff as much.
Like something that would... an anti-stun gear.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Or what we saw with the Suicide Squad gear set, where there was some interesting stuff, right? Like the skulls.
Oh, Enchantress.
Enchantress's gear, yeah, with the skulls. That really is interesting because it's damage, but it's not just damage, it's rhythm, it's...
Right, because it buys you another full combo.
Yeah, so there's a lot of complexity of play there, separate from just the stats that it has on the card.
Yeah. No, so, yeah, thanks for the question, actually. It's kind of nice to look back on things and get a little nostalgic and think about how things have changed over the years since we started playing Injustices and since we started YouTubing.
Yeah, for sure. That really takes us back. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.